Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of our Dungeon Boss FAQ series. Today I'm going to be going over the combat revamp that is taking place, which is going to be a reset of the calculations that calculate damage. And so we're going to be going over some of the expected changes there, how it's going to impact you as a player, and essentially what are some of the ins and outs of this process here. Before I get started on that, first let me explain to you that these are not my specific opinions. This is not my expert knowledge. This is just regurgitating information that I was provided. So this information comes from Dungeon Boss Dylan. He is a system designer for the combat revamp. He is the one in charge of overseeing this combat calculation. So there's a few different things that are going to be taking place in terms of what's going to happen with this combat revamp. Rather than try and list them all out in terms of here's our goals and here's what we're going to do, I'm just going to go through a bunch of bullet points. You can follow along, and when you get to one that you like or want to learn more about, just pay a little bit more attention, read the on-screen prompts, and we'll go from there. So first up is dealing with the calculation itself and dealing with attack. I've mentioned this many times in other videos. I've done my own calculations and benchmarked this many times, and I came up with a number myself that said for every 1% you raise your attack value, the actual output damage goes up 2.5%. We have confirmation from Dylan himself that they accidentally set this so that when attack was calculated, it was rolled twice in the calculation. So basically, this is why everybody started attacking or stacking attack, is because it literally was twice as important as any other stat because it got counted twice. And so we've seen attack runes vastly outpace the defense runes, and now your defense doesn't make a difference for the vast majority of people, at least as far as the actual defense stat. The defense stat is almost a joke at this point for a lot of people because of the way that attack scales. So what they did, they found they found the root of this issue, and they've definitely removed the counting twice from the calculation. So that is going to be no more. So that was one of the big things with the calculation that's going to take place. There are going to be some other minor tweaks to the actual damage calculations as well. We have not been made privy to that information though. So similar to as we don't have the actual attack calculations now, we're likely not going to have them after the revamp either. But know that they are going to calculate better, and attack and defense are going to scale a little bit better and more in parallel with each other, rather than one attack really outpacing defense. Next up is one that a lot of us have been asking for a long time, and that is to make stars relevant again. And what this basically means is some of us are getting sick of a 3-star Grognog being better than my 6-star Igorok. Why should that even be close to the case? Back in the day before runes, your 3-star this never ever beat my 6-star that. It just did not happen. And so runes really made the average hero much better and made the good hero a little bit less underwhelming. So essentially what we're doing now is the stars are going to be added in as sort of modifiers. They're going to be multipliers, if you will. And so what they have said, and this is a direct quote from Dylan himself, they're basically wanting us to, when we get that 6-star, we want to get that awesome feeling of basically accomplishing something. This personally tells me that if you do choose to grind out that 6-star, you should be getting a slightly better bonus than if you went from 4 to 5 or from 3 to 4, etc. So while we were not given the exact nature of the multipliers themselves, I don't know how it's actually going to work. I would assume it's going to scale pretty regularly from stars 1 through 4, and then possibly when we get that 6, it might actually jump up a little bit better. Or maybe even a slight exponential increase from all the way up. So the increase from 1 to 2 might be one thing, then slightly better increase from 2 to 3, slightly better 3 to 4, slightly better 4 to 5, and so on and so forth. We do not know what the exact numbers are here, but it should make it so that somebody who's attacking you with really good runes, but only a 3-star hero, you should be able to stand up to them. So you shouldn't be getting poached by, let's say, a 3-star Kozar against maybe one of your 6-star lighter armored people. You'll stand a little bit better of a chance there. So I'm personally looking forward to that awesome feeling. I will be pretty bummed out if there appears to be no difference between the 5th and 6th star. That being said, there's probably going to be some major testing that's needed here. This is being put forth to the meta focus group, so realistically, they should already be on that. They should know whether or not 5th star versus 6 stars making that much of a difference at all. So essentially what's going to happen now is with these multipliers, all of the damage output in the calculations will take place, or not the damage output, sorry, the actual stat bonuses that you get will take place, and then after that your multiplier will trigger all of those things. So this is similar to how the epics work. All of your individual traits or your stats get their individual numbers, and then if you get an epic like Igorok, for example, and you buff up all of his defense with runes, and let's say you get his defense up to 3,000, if you then unlock his epic and get that immediate 10% extra defense, he's automatically take that 3,000, add another 10%, he's already got 3,300 then. So if you do the full 30%, then he's going to get 900 extra. He's going to have 3,900 after all of his runes are calculated. So it's going to benefit you to have these, because then all of the runes are going to get the extra bonus as well. So if you rune up your hero really well, you're going to be compounding that effectiveness by getting those extra stars. In my opinion, this should be one of the most critical components of this revamp, because it is going to take us back to slightly before pre-rune, where basically a lot of heroes were determined how good they were based on their stars. And so if you had 6-star heroes on your PvP defense, they were going to be tough to kill. Now that's not the case at all. And so I'm hoping that this brings us back to that, where if I have good heroes and I put in the time to level them up appropriately, they should be better than your mediocre heroes. Obviously, runes are going to still play a big part of that, but it should bring the gap between these things much smaller. Next up is damage reduction. Damage reduction has been a pain in the ass for a lot of people for quite some time. Pretty much after people noticed that you could basically pair certain heroes together and break the system and get up over 100% damage reduction through whatever sources, they basically were, a lot of people say that this was cheating and it was tacky, and I won't get into some of the adjectives, but it really pissed people off. The fact that you'd get to the point where it's 4-on-1 against Bauble and you can't kill him, so you basically lose by default. Even if he can't kill you, you still lose because you have to retreat because you can't kill him. And so they are basically taking this factor out now. So essentially, what they've done a couple of things to reduce this. We'll start out with the one still in damage reduction. They've put a hard cap on damage reduction at 90%. So no matter what you've stacked, it will never ever go over 90%. So no matter what, 10% of your damage is always getting through. That's guaranteed. It may not be much damage based on what the attack versus defense calculation kicks out, but 10% of your damage will always make it through no matter what the reduction. So even though you won't run into an unkillable Bauble, you might still run into an unkillable Bauble, because if he does still have 90% damage reduction and a lot of high defense and you can't do enough damage, he's still going to heal himself and you'll probably still have to retreat. That being said, you should be able to at least attack and do damage with somebody like Shadowblade. With his high single target attack, you should actually be able to do damage to him. And so I'm looking forward to this one quite a bit. And the reason it made people so mad is some people didn't have the appropriate counters for these, and they felt like they could never beat a damage reduction team. And so with the combination of stars being more important and removing this ability to get somebody that's unkillable, I think the damage reduction here is pretty nice. 90% still seems quite high, which is going to lead us into our next phase. The next phase is the plus damage percent. So for too long, too many people are wondering which of these runes is better, attack plus damage, or plus damage, attack, and then plus damage. It's like, well, I have 10% plus damage and another 8% plus damage. Seems like it'd be pretty good. And then you run the numbers and it's like plus 18% damage. That's really only It's not much in terms of the attack that you could put on if you stacked the double attack rune with the way the calculation took place. So basically there's a lot of confusion in terms of, well, which damage is multiplied, how is it multiplied, and such like that. Where does this extra percent come from? And nobody really knew. So what they've done is they've taken plus percent damage, stripped it out completely. Plus percent damage is now a direct counter to damage reduction. Percentage-wise, it's a 1-to-1 counter. So for example, if that bauble out there still has 90% damage reduction, you can now stack your plus percent damage against that, and that will directly lower that number. So what they've done with this is they've changed the name of it because it is no longer plus damage. They are now calling it damage penetration or penetration damage. I don't remember the exact name of it. We're going to call it penetration damage right now. And what that is it is a extra percent that directly counters that damage reduction. The hard cap on this is going to be 50% per hero. So this is up from a 30% plus damage that you can get right now. So basically, if you have a 90% damage reduction bauble and you have 50% penetration damage, that damage reduction is now going to be 40% for bauble. And so keep in mind that the calculations will still take place in a specific order, so you are still going to see some low attacks. So you're going to still get the attack value versus defense to calculate the initial damage output. Then the differential between damage reduction and damage penetration will determine the amount of damage mitigation for reduction there, and that will ultimately result in the final damage being dealt. So also, they've mentioned in there as a sort of a disclaimer, because people are going to be really pissed whenever there's big changes. People do not like Dungeon Boss messing with their runes. So they've mentioned, this was directly from Dylan as well, he said that if you have plus percent damage runes, they will scale appropriately with whatever they're making the damage penetration to be. So I don't know if that means that whatever the scale percent for the max is, taking the max 30% up to 50%, which in this case here is a 66% increase. Does that mean if I have a plus 10% damage right now, it is going to be plus 16%? I don't know that, but he did say that they would scale appropriately. So those of us that do have a plus 10% damage rune, it will not just give plus 10% damage penetration. It might go higher than that due to the scaling. But I'm not overly optimistic about that. I'm expecting to probably not use too many of those in the first place until I see what the overall result is. So I think that's going to be a handy one for all of those damage reduction teams. If you're going against a team that does not have damage reduction, if your damage penetration outdoes the damage reduction, then they have confirmed that it will add on damage to that. So it will add as a damage modifier and not just a direct counter to the damage reduction. It is still going to be a plus modifier as well, but it directly impacts the damage reduction. That was its main trait right now. So those are the major facets of the combat revamp. There are a few miscellaneous things I'm going to go over here just as final closing notes, just to fill in the last few topics that came up during this discussion. So first up is going to be the health bonus in PvP is going to be gone. Right now everybody is buffed 40%. To basically, they did that to make people live longer and make the PvP a little bit more engaging. Personally, I think this is a big swing and a miss. I do not like the idea, even with the combat revamp, of removing this plus health. The reason being is I feel like at first the calculation is not going to be honed in well enough. We're actually going to see an even worse one-shot meta than what we had before. Because that 40% health, I mean 40% doesn't seem like a lot, but if you have somebody with 5,000 health and you can bump them to basically 7,500 health, that might be the difference between living or dying. And I think what this is going to do is we're going to see a lot of people getting one shot, and they're going to be just as grumpy with PvP. Personally, I think PvP needs to last 5 or 6 rounds. And if it doesn't, I feel like that's a failure on the developer's part. PvP should not be a one-shot meta where it's just a big pissing contest to see who's got the best runes. That's what it is now, and I feel like without the extra health bonus, it's still going to be like that until that calculation really gets honed in there. So I'm not thrilled about this one, but we will see, how it's going to turn out. Next up, they've removed a level-based mischance, which basically what that is if you were a lower hero going against a higher hero, there was a penalty there that basically said, why are you a level 60 attacking a level 70? We're going to throw in a little 10% chance to miss. So that is now gone. If you are low level, you will get a fair shot at attacking. It'll be the same as a 70 versus a 70 and a 1 versus a 70. So no matter what, you will have the exact same hit chance, regardless of level. Next up, for those of you that are number crunchers like myself, they have reduced the randomization between damage output, which means if you're plotting every single one of your attacks on a graph to see what it looks like in terms of variance, these are going to be much, much more clustered together, allowing you to do some better calculations and figure out how much damage output you're going to do. This one isn't going to benefit a ton of people, but it's going to prevent you from doing that really weak attack. So most of the attacks will be right around what they're supposed to be. There's going to be less major attacks that go above it and less ones that go outside of it below. So it's going to reduce outliers and bring them a little bit tighter together. Next one is they are fixing they're fixing healing to better coincide with the skill right now. Currently, pretty much any healer with any skill in any situation is healing your entire team for basically 100%. And that was not the scope of how they wanted skill to function. But basically, we're seeing this with low-level PvP. Anybody that has Nub, they're getting 3 free turns of 100% health, because if you can't kill somebody, boom, 100% healed back. And that's totally against the spirit of what a healer's supposed to be doing. Now, it's great for some of us in some instances, but in practicality, that's not how it's supposed to be. So they are reducing the overall heals that's being done, and is going to make it much more dependent on skill. So actually your skill is going to be important. So you actually do want to stack some skill to get better heals out of it. They're going to be looking at those numbers constantly. I expect those to change within the first couple months of the combat revamp. Dylan did say they need to watch the numbers there to see what feels like an appropriate percentage threshold for the heals to be at. So based on all of these things that we've discussed, the goal from what they've said is to basically make health and defense make health and defense much more viable in terms of PvP. They want you to feel like you can put health runes on a hero and make it worthwhile. They want you to be able to put defense on a hero and make it worthwhile. So it's going to eradicate some of those needs to just go attack on everything. Now, personally, do I feel like that's going to be the outcome? I'm a little bit pessimistic on that front. I feel like still attacking or stacking attack to everything, I think, is still going to trump the defense until we can actually see the exact calculation that takes place and have somebody with a math background like myself or a few other of the forum people actually take a look at it to see where the pitfalls are. That's the only way that we can ever truly see what the issue is with the attack. My thought is, realistically, there should be some sort of a mathematician on the staff at Dungeon Boss, so somebody should be doing the calculations and seeing where things go south. But personally, I would like to see those numbers myself, but I doubt that's ever going to happen. But the goal here is going to be so that you can take any one of your heroes and hopefully put the runes that you want on them and make them somewhat competitive. It shouldn't be just, stack every single power rune you have on Shade so you can do 90,000 damage to somebody even when they have 4,000 defense. That's against the spirit of the game. We want you to be able to take a bunch of those bulwarks and put them on Samurai Takume and survive for a couple turns. Maybe even throw some attack on there and actually have him able to kill somebody. So the goal here would be to make it so health and defense make more sense. Make it so your attack doesn't just trump everything, and make for much more balanced heroes. So if you want to build a completely well-balanced hero, you should have the option to do that and not feel like that hero can't compete. Again, like I said, will that be the case? I don't think it will be, but we'll see. I'm pretty pessimistic, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a little bit of optimism. So those are all of the notes that I have. If you are looking for a hard copy of the conversation that took place and all of this was outlined, ask somebody on the forum. There is a hard copy of it on a Google Drive somewhere. I don't know where it is. I don't look at it that way. I just looked at the conversation that I had online. And I mean line, the app, so not online. That being said, that is going to wrap up this discussion. Hopefully it's helpful, shine a little bit of light on what's to come here. I don't know what the timeline is for this. It's definitely going to be at least a month yet. They are going to be releasing this after guild boss battles, so it's not something that's coming up right immediately. But I think early fall is when it's expected. So I don't know the exact date, but I'm going to say it's a fall release. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can certainly send them my way. I do not have all of the answers for all of the changes here. Like I said, we were not privy to some of the specific details, and the meta focus group is under a non-disclosure, so it's not like they can divulge that anyways. So the only people that know stuff about this are the meta focus and the developers. So if you have generic questions in terms of how something might be impacted, feel free to let us know or let me know, and obviously, people in comments on forums are more than happy to chime in. So until next time, we will see you again, and thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. If you like this video, please show your continued support by hitting that like button, and be sure to check out both my YouTube channels for new content all the time. And always remember, peace is a lie, there's only passion. We'll see you next time.